Welcome to another stage analysis video. It's Sunday the 30th of July 2023. Got a lot to get through as always on the weekend video. You can break it down into individual chapters and watch the different segments at different times. You don't have to watch the entire video in one go, but the members part of the video will be about an hour and a half long, so broken down into 10 to 20 minute segments for each of the different sections, the watch list, the market breadth, the industry bell curve, the indexes and stage 2 stocks and more. So we'll get through that in a bit. So I'm going to start off today in a little bit of a different order. I wanted to go through some of the week's movers in stage 2 on volume, not necessarily stage 2 breakouts, all of them. Google, for example, here is a continuation breakout that's been in stage 2 for a little while now. So just want to go through a few of those volume movers, as you've had some earnings moves this week, which have started to get a few stocks moving again on volume, as well as obviously the stronger market action at the end of the week after a bit of weakness on Thursday. So which was a fairly strong shakeout for quite a few. So go through that in a bit in the indexes. So let's get started on the stage 2 stocks here on volume. So Google to begin with. As I said, continuation breakout attempt on earnings here. So breaking through this base structure that's been developing now. So this is base 1 of the stage 2 advance. So Google moved into stage 2. I got the stage 2 breakout as this week here, but technically started to move out into stage 2 on this week here. So back in the later part of March. So, but it was a bit of a weak breakout attempt at that point. The pullback only came back in around 5%. So both traders and investors would have held on through that point if they did take that initial breakout attempt there. But obviously the second breakout attempt, where it followed through more strongly on volume back in May, and then moved higher for 3 weeks before starting to build this current base structure. So a good little shakeout in this base structure here as well before moving higher on an earnings. So you can see it's moved above Mansfield relative strength line, which has started to flatten out at this point here. So this is our 52-week. Blue line is the 52-week moving average of the stock divided by the S&P 500. So we say across above the zero line is this point here, which is where you can see it was close to the week where it started to move out. Often you'll find the stage 2 breakout point and the crossover in the Mansfield relative strength line are in very close proximity a lot of the times. So if it does break out above it earlier, as we see here, you often get a pullback when the RS line is still declining. So you can see currently we've got a rising 10-week moving average, rising 30-week moving average. If we drop down to the daily chart of this, you can see the gap up move in the after hours there. Tuesday, Wednesday, and then started to move through. So here's the little base structure that had been developing. We had a little bit of a double bottom pattern within Google, which actually started to follow through here. The pullback shook out a few back underneath the 50-day moving average, but has managed to rally back and explode higher this week with about a 10% move on the week. So continuing to look strong at the moment, with potential for it to move back up towards those 2021 highs, which currently still, where are we? Got around 13-14% to the 2021 highs at the moment. Another big mover this week was XPEV. So this has come up in the watch list multiple times throughout the last few months or so as it started to move out from stage 1 into early stage 2, but it's accelerated dramatically this week with a 60% move on the week, breaking out of this initial tight base structure that had been forming. So on some very heavy volume, one of the third heaviest volume bar you can see on the chart from the last few years here. So moving out into stage 2 here around 5 weeks ago and around 9 weeks since the Wyckoff spring. So this is a local spring within the base structure. So the broader structure was through here. So you can see that. But the local structure, the tighter action, so had made a spring attempt 9 weeks ago. So stage 1, phase C, and then moved into phase D and started to break out into early stage 2. So this is our obviously areas of interest, and on the what we call the backup range, but on this was very, very strong and didn't back up much at all, managed to hold above the top of the full price base structure there, and has now followed through significant volume. So just starting to outperform versus the S&P 500, which is now starting to flatten. The zero line is now starting to flatten out. So this is from one of the Chinese automakers. We've got NIO as well, which will come up in a minute in that group, and obviously Tesla has been moving reasonably well recently, but did shake out a little bit over the last week or so. So move down. QS, another one that's been coming up in the watch list recently. It's already up 75% or so since it was highlighted initially here. I think we highlighted it on the 200-day moving average break here as it started to move up through the base structure. So you can see the broader base structure that was developing. Started to highlight it again as it came up through the structure. So you can see a selling climax, your automatic rally, secondary testing, up thrusting, and starting to build some higher bases through here. So it's starting to highlight it through here. I believe it's rallied fairly strongly since then now. Big move again on Friday after a good shakeout. So it's up 70% or so since that 200-day moving average point there. And what we call a sign of strength here over the last few days as it started to bust its way out into early stage 2 now. So it's starting to move above some of the near-term resistance from the broader structure here, but you can see it had a big long stage 4 decline for multiple years. So there's going to be a lot of headwinds with this one particularly. So obviously big long stage 2 decline, stage 4 declines take a long while to shake out, and could obviously get a lot of chop as it attempts to move into stage 2. NIO, another one from the automobiles group here, one of the Chinese automakers, had a really good run through 2020, really ran huge. So this one pulled back, big stage 4 decline after breaking down through the later part of 2021 into stage 4. It's been building a base structure. You can see the broader base structure on this one that's been developing. So if we push out to the broader structure, a bit of a terminal shakeout at the bottom of that. Only literally recently started to technically move into stage 1 as it started to close above the 30-week moving average here. But you can see from the broader structure, it's been attempting to base since last October with the selling climax, your automatic rally secondary test, or whatever you want to move it to these points here. And then up thrusting action, further testing the terminal shakeout, and then starting to build its way up. So in terms of the base structure, we would consider it in phase D with a sign of strength, the jump across the creek at the moment. So a 39% move on the week. Moving averages, 30-week moving average and 10-week moving average are turning up here, with the 10-week moving average just crossing the 30-week moving average, and the Mansfield relative strength line crossing the zero line there. So if we zoom in on this one as well onto the daily, you can see a little bit extended in the short term here. You can see that steep 200-day moving average, which marks the fact that there's going to be a lot of overhead resistance to deal with. And you can see that broader structure that had been developing across here. So if we go on to the free ATR levels, you can see it's run up above the free ATR level here. It actually opened on Friday above the free ATR level and followed through with an 11% move on the day. So heavy volume over the last 5 days as it's rallied out into early stage 2. You can see the pivot breakout here, moving it into stage 2. So, but extended in the short term. So we'll be expecting some kind of consolidation and back and fill back towards into the normal range in the coming days or weeks. Futu also making an early attempt to move back out into stage 2. This one has had a few failed attempts to move out into stage 2. You can see it's had a choppy time of it through the base structure here. So actually zoom in on the daily chart here, you can see the more recent structure. So if we look at this climactic move, a local selling climax within the range here, and then automatic rally secondary testing type action through this area here. So we withdraw our little structure, more local structure through here since the start of 2023. You can see we've had some spring type action, higher low test, and starting to move out of the structure. So you've gone from phase A, phase B into C, and now into phase D with a potential sign of strength. And we started to break above some near-term levels through here where it had been tested multiple times and this local pivot. So technically starting to potentially move out into early stage 2 here as we go back to the weekly chart, and obviously a strong close of a weekly closing range on stronger relative volume, the Mansfield zero line, Mansfield relative strength line above the zero line there. So technically attempting a stage 2 breakout, but obviously overhead resistance to deal with still from these prior moves, especially this significant bar here, which it's not yet broken above. Roku, another earnings mover. So this one's been attempting to base for a while now, since the selling climax at the end of 2022 here. It's had that change of behavior. So we look for this often with when a stock is moving from a stage 4 decline into early stage 1. Sometimes you don't always get a move back above the 30-week moving average straight away, depending on how deep and sharp the stage 4 decline has been. But it's been a long, drawn-out stage 4 decline. So this is what we call a change of behavior, and this indicates with the move above the 30-week moving average as well, the attempt to move up towards stage 1. But we don't necessarily mark it the same because of the strength of that move from this point to this point. So we look for, often when you get a V bottom move like this, you actually mark the top point and then start to mark the first pivot as the start of your potential stage 1 structure to watch. So this is our stage 1 area. So this is a V bottom with what we call a raised stage 1 base, and now we've got a stage 2 breakout attempt. So we drop down onto the daily chart. You can see the earnings move on this one. This was highlighted in the watch list on Thursday night in the after hours move around this point here. So followed through really strongly, plus 31% on the day on heavy volume. But you can see the pivot point above the 200-day moving average there. That technically marks our rough guide to where the stage 2 breakout point might be. So you can see it tested it a few times before that in the week or so prior to earnings here, but this is our first significant move above that level on volume, starting to break above the Mansfield relative strength line, is starting to break above its zero and more convincingly into some local pivots. So we'll put that now into early stage 2. Obviously some heavy volume on the weekly chart there. So next potential entry point on this one will be if it starts to rally through and come back into some kind of consolidation, or the entry point. So the backup entry point is either it needs to hold above the breakout level and then stabilize, and then potentially on that kind of area there. But often you don't always get that. Like XPEV, for example, we had a tighter move and then it started to push back out again. So the backup doesn't always have to come all the way back down. Obviously, if it comes immediately back down below the breakout level, then that would be a failed breakout attempt as an upthrust. So we're always looking to see, obviously, extra confirmation in the following weeks and follow through volume if it is moving higher. But if it does pull back, you want to see volume contracting. So CMRE, another new stage 2 breakout attempt here, breaking multiple levels through here on this one on a heavy volume. Again, Mansfield relative strength line moving above the zero line for the first time there in a long while, since back in mid 2022 here. So this is a fairly large base structure that's been forming. You can see some upthrust action, spring type action at the bottom of the range, sign of strength bar, and then moving out into phase D. Now with the sign of strength rally here into early stage 2. So potential multiple pivot zones through this area here. So this lower level, technically your stage 2 level. TDOC still in stage 1. This did make an early attempt to move out into stage 2, but on some heavier volume this week. But because of the length and depth of the stage 4 decline in this one, it's been heavy overhead resistance. There's potential for obviously short squeeze type in these kind of names like this. You can see the more local base structure here. This is the broader structure that is within. So this is your most local pivot. It did attempt to break above that on Thursday, but failed, came back in again, but then held on Friday and is still above this 200-day moving average. Relative strength is still below the zero line here. So technically this is if you go with the Wyckoff attributes on this, you've got a local selling climax, automatic rallies, secondary testing, phase B. So technically this could be your phase C area into phase D potentially. Could start to broaden out into the structure, sign of strength, the jump across the creek. If it does start to move above this 30, 31 to 32 area, then technically it could be moving into stage 2. But as I said, with the length and depth of this stage 4 decline, if we use the Ichimoku cloud on the weekly, you can see there's a lot of overhead resistance to deal with, all the way up to around the 50 level at the moment, until later in the year when it drops off a little bit. So down to the 33 level a little bit later in the year, around the later October time. Coursera, so COUR. This was another one that had earnings. I highlighted it on Thursday's watch list in the after hours earnings move. So if we look at this on a daily chart here, you can see the move in the after hours was up to around this area. So good, really good, strong follow through move on this one. It's started to break out into stage 2 on heavy volume. Mansell relative strength moving above the 0 line. Again, you can see the broader structure on this one. It's still within, but breaking some local levels, and obviously relative to the 200-day moving average here, we're breaking above multiple levels. So technically moving into early stage 2, and this lower level here shows the previous failed stage 2 attempt. So this higher base structure with some local spring action through there. So technically moving into stage 2 on this one as well. As you can see, it was an IPO back at the early part of 2021. So be looking for a strong move out back towards that IPO level if it can continue to move into stage 2. INSW, not technically, this one's in stage 3 still, so a big move this week on heavy volume. You can see a local structure through here that's attempting to break back out of. So we say it's in stage 3. This is what we call a change of behavior. Start to close below the 30-week moving average. Rally couldn't make much progress, got back below the 30-week moving average again. So technically we've got this local stage 3 base structure developing here after a strong stage 2 move. So it is attempting to recover, but even if it does recover above these local levels, then technically could still be in stage 3, but it could go on for a test of the upper levels. So I just wanted to highlight that one. There's a little bit of a change of behavior over what we've seen recently in that, and the group as a whole, the marine transportation group, as multiple stocks have been doing similar kind of things. Align, this one attempting to make a continuation breakout. You can see the local structure here that had been in after the V bottom. So this is an extremely high raised base structure. We didn't get hardly any basing. We've got a V bottom move and a blowout move in the January before basing for the last 5-6 months or so now. So now attempting to make a continuation move here. So you can see the gap up move there on Thursday. And BA, also similar kind of move. Boeing making a stage 2 continuation breakout after a huge sort of V bottom type move on this one. It's been going sideways for a long time and frustrating many with lots of attempts to push out. So this is the first time it's actually made a convincing continuation breakout. Logi, this one also coming up in the watch list, breaking out into a new stage 2 attempt. It's had a few failed attempts, so this one looking to attempt it again. HBM also been coming up in the watch list recently again, so you can see that more local structure through here, making a new breakout attempt from that on stronger relative volume. Mansfield relative strength line moving back above the 0 line there. We'll see some near-term resistance to deal with on that one. And then Skechers, local structure at the moment, been in stage 2 for a long time. As you stage 2 breakout back here in late November, initial backup move, and then have a secondary backup before rallying on and building this base structure in the upper end of the 2021 range here. So in the turbulent zone, looking to make a stage 2 continuation breakout.